Welcome to the Provider's Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time.
Hey guys, welcome to Better Doctor Project, where we interview healthcare providers to tap into their experiences so we can turn our challenges into our biggest strengths. We hope today's episode inspires you to take that next step to become who you want to be in practice. I'm Dr. Beck.
And I'm Dr. Mack.
Let's get started. Hey guys, Dr. Mack here. I think it's pretty obvious that no matter who you are, the word failure can come with some pretty negative connotations. No matter if you're a student or a practicing clinician right now, I think we've all felt the pressure of wanting to perform well for ourselves, our family, our professors, mentors, or patients. The same nerves that you might get before a big exam can rear right back up a couple years later when you're about to walk into the room with a patient, knowing that you have to tell them that the treatment you intended to work for them just simply didn't. Or perhaps that they didn't benefit from your treatment as much as you'd hoped they would. These conversations aren't easy, but they will happen, and it's really important to be prepared for exactly how you handle them both personally and professionally. Believe it or not, failure can actually make you a better provider, and in addition, failure can actually help your patients figure out where they need to go, even if it might not be with you at that very moment. Trust me, they'll thank you later for this. To discuss this with us today, we have Dr. Michael Hildebrand, who's a doctor of physical therapy and the owner of M3 Physio, a mobile concierge physical therapy clinic in Louisiana. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the topic of overcoming failure in practice, what this looks like, and how we can be more resilient and more successful by offering ourselves a little grace to fail, and how we learn from it. Hey BDP, we are here tonight with Dr. Michael Hildebrand, and we're going to be talking tonight about addressing failures in practice. And as I was just talking about this with him before, I feel like this is something we talk about a lot in general life. You know, we talk about this with relationships, with anything outside of work, but in reality, it happens in any profession, especially healthcare. And I think it's something we need to talk about so we know how to handle these situations. So we're bringing him on tonight. He's going to talk about it with us. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me.
Awesome. So in your mind, obviously, we all know how failures can happen outside of work, but when it comes to healthcare specifically, you know, what kind of ideas and examples come to mind of how failure can occur with our patients?
So the biggest thing that comes to my mind initially is like overpromising or setting up expectations that they're going to get back to a level of function that may not actually happen. And it's one I've seen in my career a lot. So that's literally what pops into my mind as soon as you said that question.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge one because that can be expanded across all specialties, really. Obviously, we want to encourage our patients and be positive, but to overpromise things and make it sound like everything's sunshine and rainbows isn't necessarily good for them either.
I think that's a really interesting one too, because one of the reasons we started BDP is because there are some things that you just learn with experience, right? The more patients you see, the more mentors you have, the more people you work with. And sometimes we don't get the right mentor, we don't get the right experience. And then when it gets popped into our lap, we're like, what do I do with this, right? And that's why we created this whole podcast to gain experience from each other. So I feel like, you know, expectations like that, setting those expectations and that fine line between balancing, you know, not crushing someone's dreams of never being able to do something again, or, you know, maybe for a geriatric patient, like, yeah, okay, you want to train horses again, but you're 95, you know, not taking that away from them, but also really honing in on what's realistic for them. That's a really fine line to try to draw without having that experience under your belt. Do you feel like you've gained that just from personal experience, or are there some other ways that you've like really helped define that so that you feel comfortable guiding patients into their expectations appropriately?
I think it's, like I said, from experience, but also having failed, multiple times over and over, and you learn from that, and you get better. I think, or hope that I get a little bit better each time, and learn a better way to maybe have that conversation with the person, or set expectations up in the beginning, and just my goal right now in my practice is to just be honest, like to be as upfront and as honest as possible with people. And I try to do that from the beginning. I don't. Like I said, my personal goal is not to overpromise, or you're going to get back to 100% pain-free life, as we all know in the musculoskeletal world. Very rarely, it would be weird if you never had pain again. There would be something wrong if you never experienced some form of pain again. It's a good like warning system to tell you something's going on, something needs to change. And so, but a lot of people come in and that's their goal. I want to be out of pain. I never want to have pain again. And so having that discussion, that's a good education, learning, teaching moment to discuss, like, okay, this pain might be uncomfortable right now. It might not be affecting, or it might be affecting your life in a detrimental way. And we're going to help you get out of that and get back into function. But pain is okay. Pain, you have to have pain in your life. Like, that's a terrible way to say it, but you have to have some form of pain. That means you're living. Like, you're going to have pain. You're going to have aches. Like, as you get older, you're going to have aches and pains.
We forget our life is dynamic like that, and it's constantly changing, and then it's adaptable. I think that's the biggest thing I find patients forget about their bodies. They're like, why they get mad at them? Like, why is my back doing this? Why are my legs feeling so tight? I'm like, well, because you trained your hamstrings to become a chair for the last 8 hours a day, for the last 3, years. It's literally doing what you told it to do. So give it a new narrative. And it's like, whoa, there's so much possibility there. It totally changes the way we focus on pain. Like, it's no longer fearful. It's just like, oh, that's a road sign,
Yeah. One of my favorite things that my husband does with his patients is he'll literally tell them to their face, like, did you know that I sometimes have pain? And they freak out. Like, how could my chiropractor ever have pain? Or how could a 31-year-old, relatively healthy individual, have pain sometimes? And I just love that he does that, because instantly their brain changes.
Yes.
And so they'll say, okay, well, what do you do when you're in pain? And he'll say things like, well, I do my back exercises. I go to the gym and I ride the exercise bike. I get adjusted. I stretch, and he tells them these things about how to get out of an episode. And it almost just, it makes them honestly feel better about themselves that someone so young and so healthy can go through something similar to what they're dealing with. And the reality is, sometimes patients just need to realize that even though they're in a difficult spot when it comes to pain or any kind of healthcare condition, there are other people out there going through the same thing. Health is a journey and not a destination, which is a super corny thing I like to tell my patients.
Yes.
Because you could have 1 year of amazing health followed by a year of horrid health. And then guess what? You could have a third year of amazing health again. It's really this roller coaster that's so dependent on the decisions that we make in life.
Yeah. I love that your husband says it. I tell my patients that all the time, because I've experienced excruciating back pain, and literally to the point like you're crawling to move. And just like he says, like, all right, therapist mindset. Okay, do my exercises, do the stretches, do the things to get back. And so when you, just like you said, when you talk to someone and tell someone like, look, I've experienced that to the point like I've not been able to walk, it means the world to them. They're like, oh, you get it. Like, you're the person that gets it. And then that buy-in, and that you're able to have that open discussion with them, because they're a lot more willing, in my experience, to open up with you.
It's empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of good scenario, bad scenario. So let's say a patient comes into your office. Maybe you're a new doc, maybe you're not, but let's say you have already seen this patient several times, and maybe it's like visit 4 or 5, and you realize that maybe they're just not progressing the way that they should, or you realize maybe the initial diagnosis was incorrect, or maybe physical therapy or whatever modality or treatment that you're doing is not right for them. And you realize, oops, I think I just had a mini failure. What is the best way that you have found in your practice to have that discussion with a patient? Because it's a hard thing to bring up, but we can't not tell them what's going on.
Yeah, because the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so that's when if it's something major at that point, and I'm like, okay, I missed something. I didn't see this. Something's changed, whatever it is. I kind of pause, like, hey, let's talk for a second. And then I kind of gauge where they think they're at. So I love this question, like, so 0% being where we started and 100% being where you want to be. Where do you see yourself? And then where do you see therapy going? So if they're like, hey, I'm doing 60, 70% better than when I came in here, and for whatever reason that's happened, cool, we'll keep going. But if they're like, yeah, I'm like 10% better, and we're at the fourth or fifth visit, like something, like I said, something's not right. And so that's when I open that dialogue and like, okay, do you feel like this is helping? Like we talk about the game plan and moving forward. And then at that point, if there's a disconnect, let me help you figure out what's the best next course of action. Is it seeing another musculoskeletal provider? Is it going back to your primary? Is it some other form of treatment? And we've had that rediscussion when to figure out what their mindset is of what they think will help and what maybe is the best course of action. And yeah, you have to be careful because you can make some people upset because they're like, okay, I've been seeing you 4 or 5 times. But then I think that goes back to having that discussion initially on, like we talked about before the podcast started, nothing's ever 100%. Like you can't guarantee anything. You have probability, and that's, to me, a lot of what medicine is there's high probability with certain treatments, and that's the course of action we're going to take. But there's still that percent chance that it's not going to help. And so, in my experience, having that discussion, even though it's hard on you as a provider, and sometimes can upset the patient, they end up appreciating it. Maybe not in the moment, but down the road. They may come back. You may see them at the grocery store, and they say, "Hey, I really appreciate you talking to me about that. I went to see Dr. So-and-so, and he was really able to help me." And I would rather hear that all day long than try to keep someone and I'm not the person that can help them.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love the way, this is why I love podcasts, because I never know what people are going to say. And the way that you just responded to that question is so great because you did not do it on your own. You did that with the patient. So there are some providers who, when failure happens or a change of events needs to occur, they're just like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what you got to do. See you, bye. And that's not okay. We need to literally sit down with the patient, see where their head's at. One, see what good things have happened, and then 2, see what still needs to occur. And again, that just comes down to setting expectations with them. But I love that you said that because you're including the patient in their healthcare. And that's what patients truly deserve. They don't need to be in the dark.
That's empowering too. And I also think there's a difference between like clinical success and just success in general, right? Which also includes patient satisfaction. And I think that's the key part of what you're talking about here is you're really strengthening, actually, whether they're upset or not, you're strengthening the doctor-patient relationship. Doesn't matter what you're actually saying to them, you're including them at the table. And I think that that's so important. And I think nowadays in the times of Dr. Google, like that's what they want. If they're not included in the table, they're going to go search for answers like, to what's going on themselves. So it's really neat. And I think it also brings forth that sort of that genuine nature that you were talking about earlier of just, look, you're a human, I'm a human, and I'm trying to help you, and we do this together. And that also gives them a little responsibility again for their healthcare, which I think as providers, we tend to try to do it as a team, right? They can't just come to us just for fixes. They have to do some work too, usually. So
exactly.
I love that approach.
Yeah. And they might not love it right away, but they will. Things that come to mind too are when you have to refer somebody out for something before you can individually treat them. Patients hate that, especially when they're in pain. I've had patients come in with cardiac symptoms that I need ruled out before I work on their ribs. Or I had one patient where I discovered she had a thoracic dilation of her aorta. And I said, I think we need to get this examined first before you have manipulation. And I remember how angry those patients were in that moment, right? Especially when it's a first visit, you're like, oh, they don't have a relationship with me. They just look at me like this new doc they're seeing who doesn't want to see them back. And what's fun though, is when that gets flipped around, right? And they realize, okay, you truly cared about me in that moment. They come back, they're either healthier because of what you did, or 2, maybe everything's fine, but it just shows that you're compassionate enough to make sure that they're healthy and safe before you take care of them.
When these things happen, how do you document these issues? Because I know you're usually referring out in a lot of these cases. And sometimes, hopefully, there's going to be some co-management maybe, or you might even hear from the other physician, or you might send them over with a referral explaining what you did that worked, what you did that didn't work. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? If they found something that works or doesn't work for them, hopefully we're letting the other physicians know. So how do you, share that with other physicians, and how do you document it in your own notes?
Yeah. So if I'm referring someone, initially what I like to do is I grab a piece of paper and literally write a letter, like handwritten letter, to try to keep it personal. And I say, hey, this is what the person's problem was. This is what we've been doing. This is what's been helping. This is their goal. I think you could help them, blah, blah, blah. And literally fold it up. Usually let the patient or the person read it and then let them take it to the provider that they're going to. And then the benefit of me being in a smaller town is a lot of us know each other. And so we can also pick up the phone and call and like actually have that one-on-one discussion or send a text message if somebody's busy. So I know everybody can't do that, but one of my personal goals is to make connections or friends with as many musculoskeletal or just healthcare providers in general, whether that's medical, chiro, physical therapists, because you never know when that's the person that could help the person that you're trying to refer out. And then as far as documentation, myself is I just write a little blurb under the subjective about what we talked about. And then under the plan, if I'm referring to somebody, I'm referred to so-and-so, maybe plan to follow up or call the patient in a month and just see how they're doing.
Oh, I like that. I like that additive. I think sometimes that gets forgotten. I plan to follow up with this patient on X date. And sometimes when these conversations occur, you might not see that patient for a year. And what happens when that gets lost? Or maybe that patient comes back in a year with a new complaint and you're wondering what happened at your last visit. If you didn't put something in there that you referred them out or who you referred them to or anything like that, it's just lost. And so I have heard of some providers who, they'll make word of mouth referrals and just kind of verbally tell the patient, hey, you should see so-and-so down the road. I heard that's a great PCP. And they don't put anything of any value in the note, but you can't remember everything about every patient. We all know that. But I really like that addition that you made there about the follow-up. I think that's really important, especially for the serious referrals in the really complex cases. Awesome. So on top of that, you and I have talked already a little bit about how there's work failures, there's personal failures. Obviously in any job, but especially healthcare, when we have a personal failure, that can sometimes trickle into our work day. Have you personally gone through anything like that? And if so, do you have anything you recommend on how to keep it separate, yet make sure we use it also to our advantage if it can be used to our advantage?
Yeah. In 2017, my dad passed away and we were really close. It's really hard to, pick up and go back to work the next week, and see patients and have that positive attitude that we've got to have. The thing that helped me was he was like, he always told me, always give 100% to your patients. And so that was able to help me mentally in my mindset to go in and treat people the way they should be treated and how they should be worked with or interacted with. And so that combined with, and I'm learning this again, personal failures, work failures, you learn and you grow from it, taking care of yourself. So not running 90 to nothing and never settling down, but taking that time. And what I found when I do take that time is patients understand it. Like, hey, I'm not available this Friday. Like I'm going to take a personal day and, relax, go work out, go fishing, like something, whatever it is that you enjoy, and go in to do that. And patients are, at least in my experience, are really receptive of that because then they see the same thing for themselves. And so, and like I said, that could be whatever activity, reading a book, having a glass of wine, going for a run, whatever it is that like helps you decompress, making sure you take time to do that.
It looks different for everybody. All of the examples you just mentioned are so crucial. I know for me, when I just turn on worship music, instantly my headspace changes. And everyone has that thing. It could be a hobby, it could be music, it could be honestly just peace and quiet for 10 minutes. It could literally be anything. So I think that's really, really important too. Specifically, are there any like books or podcasts or an Instagram page that you go to for motivation during a difficult time? I know for me, I have Elevation Church has a really good podcast that I listen to. And sometimes, honestly, I need to just step away from work. So I'll listen to podcasts that literally are about nothing healthcare related. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's something about being in your 20s and 30s. And they talk about just ridiculous things we have to deal with, but it just kind of takes you away from the problem. Do you have anything that helps you clear your head like that?
So I guess I'm a little on the weird side where I like work-related stuff like learning. And so I'll put on different, like I've listened to y'all's podcast.
Awesome. Yay.
Just yeah, obviously I've listened to y'all's. I'm on the podcast. But there's a counselor in Monroe that recently started his podcast. And it's The Counselor's Couch, I believe is the name of it. And even though that might not be specifically my work related, but just those things where I'm learning and like looking at better ways to handle things. One of the things I thought about before this was there's a course, Reconciling Biomechanics with Pain Science. And Greg Lehman, he's a chiropractor and a physical therapist.
Yeah, he's amazing.
It's been one of the best stress relievers as far as practice goes, because, and y'all might be able to speak on the chiropractic side. When you're going through physical therapy school, when you're first coming out to practice, there's so many different methods on how you treat. And it's like, this method works, but this method works too, but they do the opposite thing. And so which one's right? And you get so confused because you're trying to do the best for your patient. And Greg's course literally comes in and says, they all work on symptom modification. And then, so you boil it down to the basic explanation that fits across the board. And then you start looking at everything like, oh, that makes sense. And so that was one of the biggest stress relievers in a general sense for my practice, was going through that course. I've actually taken it twice now, and being able to step back and look at like, this can help a patient, just not for the reason we think it is. And, the person down the road that's doing a different technique or different method can also help the same patient.
I love that. And that is an amazing, amazing course. And I feel like that's healthcare though, in a nutshell, right? Like one thing's over here, but they're all right, because patients are not cookie cutter. You cannot cram them into a healthcare box that works for everybody. It just doesn't happen. But I love that, because I'm also like that. I'm a learner. One of my strengths in Clifton Strength Finders is input. And so I'm constantly like trying to learn more, and it excites me. And I find with stressors, there's a difference between like a mental release from stress and a physical release from stress. So I horseback ride, I dance, that kind of stuff really helps when I want to just get out of my mind. I try to bring my attention to my body, and I think that works. A lot of people run, all that kind of stuff to
running.
Decrease. I know, right? You, just kidding. It's good for you. And then I think yours, it sounds like, is a really great mental way to focus, take yourself out of your sort of physical body and really focus on the mental parts of that. So I love that. I mean, I feel like all of our professions here, we focus on that. It's a connection between brain and body. So that's who we are as humans. We're whole beings, and we have to address both parts. And I think failure sometimes affects both the physical, sense, and then also the mental sense. And I heard a really cool saying that I'd never heard before. I actually heard it this week. It's called failing up. Maybe you guys have heard about it. But the concept is basically that, yes, like you failed, but it's a tiny step, and you're going to come back and like fail up. So it's usually used, I guess, in like business terms, like failing up, like you might have failed at something, but you're still moving up in the company. And sometimes I feel like that's what we're doing as providers. Like we might have a failure with a patient or a treatment approach or something like that, but there's not one single one that we don't learn from. And so sometimes like not focusing on the actual failure, but saying like, okay, what did I learn from this? How would I do this differently in the future? Ends up just failing you up. And when the next time that happens, you're at a better level than you were before.
Well, I think as healthcare students too, I think they create this silly idea in our head that you can't ever mess up, because in high school, you have to do XYZ to get into said school. And then when you're an undergrad, you have to take XYZ courses in order to get this. And then everything's also based on time, applications open on January 1st, and then you have to do this, you have to do that. There's like this whole linear track that is ingrained in our brains, whether you're going to med school, chiro school, PT school, you're taking the GRE, the MCAT, all of these things. If you miss one of those dates or you miss one of those steps, it can set you back by a lot. So it's kind of daunting and scary. And then we get into practice our first year and we kind of forget that that's not how things are going to work anymore.
The root model is very different than the textbook.
Oh my goodness. It's such a dramatic shift. And I know because of that, your first few failures in practice can be so daunting. And Annabelle and I have chatted about this because I had, I can't remember how many months ago it was, but I got my first negative review online.
Oh, yeah.
And it destroyed me. And it didn't help that it was a false review. But on top of that, it crushed me as a person. It crushed me as a provider. And it just kind of made me wonder, oh my goodness, should I even be in healthcare? Do I still want to be in healthcare? Which is just so silly to think about. But, those first few failures or, those first major mental changes can be so daunting. But we have to go through them. We do. It's only going to make us better, and we'll grow from it and be stronger.
Sometimes the more daunting it is too, honestly, should just tell you how much you actually care about what you're doing. You know?
Very true.
And the fact is that's why we're here. It's why all of our listeners are here, because we all care about what we're doing, and we're all just trying to be better doctors for our patients. So Michael, you've been a perfect example of that. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me.
Guys, I'm so glad you could join us for this today, because this is one of my favorite topics. I think we give our patients so much grace when it comes to failing. Hey, try this exercise. It's okay. I know that didn't feel, normal yet, but try it again, right? And yet sometimes we don't hold ourselves to the same standards, and we're so harsh on ourselves. And I think especially in healthcare, we attract this kind of personality, right? Or we wouldn't be able to push through to get to the space where we are today and overcome all those obstacles. So I hope that everybody that's listening right now is so familiar with failure. And if you're not, get super comfortable with being uncomfortable. Success is not final, failure is not fatal, and it's absolutely the courage to continue that counts. So make sure that you go out today and jump into practice or your classes or your tests that are coming up head first, knowing that you might fail, but that no matter what, you're absolutely going to learn from it. Maybe even get the chance to listen to something fun in a stress-relieving way afterwards, reflect on it, and figure out how exactly it's going to make you a better provider, because it will. Don't forget, all the resources and our favorite podcasts that we talked about on today's episode can be found at our show notes, betterdoctorproject.com, so make sure to check those out today. We loved connecting with you today on this episode of the Better Doctor Project. We can't wait to share our next podcast with you in just 2 weeks. Same time, same place. Until then, pop over to Instagram to follow us at Better Doctor Project, or keep up with us at betterdoctorproject.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.